Greetings and salutations. This is the voice of Loquacious of Heard, bringing you his afterthoughts on My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, Season 7, Episode 13, titled The Perfect Pear. I heartily suggest you find and watch the episode itself, sans commentary, before proceeding with either this Afterthoughts review or viewing my full reaction, which is hosted at the link in the description. Please support the official release. Be warned, this Afterthoughts review will contain spoilers for the episode itself. With that out of the way, on to the review. This is a hard episode for me to review, because this is a phenomenally great episode. Let me begin by addressing one thing that I feel lifts this episode past merely very good to legendary status. That one thing? Subtext. Subtext can be transformative. It can fundamentally alter the perception of a story, changing it into something else. As Fim-Flam Philosophy and Petarip remind us,
in this way, a child's story could be so many different experiences. With enough subtext, a thing made for a child becomes an entirely different world to an adult. Keep an open mind, Twilight. There's no telling when subtext will defeat the facade of a thing.
As an aside, you can see my blind reaction to Rainbow Dash Presents The Star in Yellow at one of the links in the description below. But here, now, this episode, The Perfect Pear, gives us a story. The story of Bright Macintosh and Pear Butter, two young ponies who, in spite of their family's bitter rivalry, fell in love with one another and made a life together. This is the story of Applejack's parents. It's not their only story, nor is it the story that many of us want, yet also dread, to hear more about. This is not the tale of how those two loving ponies died. Because that's the subtext, the running theme which has underlain the Apple family for 7 seasons. The subtext is that the parents of Applejack, Big Macintosh, and Apple Bloom are dead. Not just gone, nor off-screen, nor traveling far-off lands, but having shuffled off the mortal coil, having joined the choir invisible, having kicked ye old proverbial bucket. They're dead, Jim. There have been indications of this truth scattered throughout the seasons. Among the greatest indications are that, for a family that is so passionate about family, the Apple parents are never mentioned, not even in passing. Nor are they ever present, not even for so especially momentous an occasion as Apple Bloom's cute Sierra.
Oh, Sugar Cube, if Mom and Dad were here, they'd be so proud of you. Aw, thanks, Applejack.
Indeed, the definitive nail in the coffin, to use a dreadfully appropriate analogy when describing the debate over the liveliness of AJ's mom and dad, happened back in Season 3, Episode 8, Apple Family Reunion, with a pair of shooting stars.
We got the whole family together this time round. Who knows if they'll all be able to make the next one?
That's true. Busy as every pony's lives are getting these days, chances are pretty slim we'll be this lucky next time round.
Given the themes of that episode, the shooting stars could reasonably be taken to be symbolic of Applejack's parents attending the family reunion, a tip of the hat to their deceased status. When the episode aired, Twitter asked Sibsy, or Sabrina, who at that time was a storyboard artist for My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and someone who worked on the Apple Family Reunion episode, whether or not that was the case. Her reply? Well, see for yourself. Sibsy, by the way, is awesome. I particularly like that her OC Wildfire appeared in several episodes. In short, the official line has, for years, been that something terrible, we know not what, happened back in the day, and the Apple parents perished. That tragedy, that subtext, has informed many other episodes involving the Apple family. The extra emphasis they put on their kinship bonds, the way in which Applejack worries over Apple Bloom's safety, the ways in which the Apple siblings all step up into adult roles, seeking responsibility and seeking to help each other around the family farm. All of this is given extra weight and gravitas by the unspoken, implied knowledge of the loss that shrank their family. A family that is smaller and broken, but still good. Still good. With the shadow of that distant tragedy hanging over the Apple family, we enter this episode, The Perfect Pair. We begin with a new face, and an old face, one unfamiliar to Applebloom. There are introductions. Applebloom doesn't know Grand Pear, but he gives her free samples of his wares, and gifts her with a jar of his famous pear jam, and he gives the young pony a parting smile. At first view, this is a little strange, a little distracting, especially if, like me, you found yourself trying to figure out if this really was William Shatner voicing the aged Grand Pear. It is, and kudos to him for his work on the part. In retrospect, it is clear that Grand Pear recognizes Applebloom, even if the two have never met. Back to the farmhouse for Applebloom, and it's time for breakfast for dinner and the introduction of a conflict. Pear products are not welcome in the Apple abode. That's been fanon for a long while. Now it's canon. Applebloom obviously knew nothing of this.
What's the big deal? It's just pear jam.
The big deal is that there is a long-standing feud between the apples and the pears.
Yep.
Why?
Why? Well, actually, I'm not really sure. You have any idea, Big Mac?
Nope.
Aha! Shades of Hooffields and McColts. A family feud, but one about which the younger generation knows little to nothing, and one that involves events so emotionally disturbing that Granny Smith cannot bring herself to speak of them. So, how to find out more?
I wonder what happened.
Me too. But if we can't ask Granny, I don't know who... We can ask Goldie Delicious. If any pony knows about the feud, it's the family historian.
Well, it's always good to see Peter New getting more lines, and Goldie, both historian and hoarder with a house full of cats, is an interesting character. She's also hesitant to speak of the feud between Apple and Pear, although, as she admits with what might almost be a hint of reluctance, if any pony has the right to know about that feud, it'd be the Apple siblings. So we launch into the tale. A tale of a neighboring farmer families and their business rivalry. A rivalry which grew to a passionate dislike of one another on all levels. Only two of their members ever got along, young Bright Macintosh and young Pear Butter, who Bright Mac nicknamed Buttercup.
Wait an apple-picking minute. Bright Mac and Buttercup, those are our parents' names.
Hello, Bombshell. Nice to know exactly which moment in the episode would first cause jaws to drop and viewers to sit up straight, often with exclamations of disbelief and surprise. 7 years, and we're finally going to find out about them. The Apple siblings knew none of this. The revelation that they are half Pear is shocking to them, although the reasons why they wouldn't know are simple enough. Their mother, Pear Butter, never used her given name. She only went by Buttercup, and her cutie mark held no overt clues to her pear ancestry. I also loved a subtle touch in Goldie Delicious's tale of the old feud. Young Granny Smith reads a bedtime story to her trees. Young Grand Pear covers his in warm blankets. And if there was any doubt as to whether or not Applejack is a grandchild of both these families, well...
And that's when the yellow birdie thought to himself, my favorite little tree isn't such a little tree anymore. So she sang her song big and strong, and they all lived in that great big tree, happily ever after. The end. Applejack! Were you reading a bedtime story to an apple tree?
Those doubts should be cleared up by AJ's actions back in Season 1, Episode 21, Over a Barrel. Naturally, the siblings want to know more about their folks. The subtext with their expressions coupled with their question.
Is there anything else you can tell us about them?
The Apple siblings don't know their parents, and they cannot ask their parents directly. There's no way for them to get to know their parents except through the stories that their older family and friends, that the ponies who knew Bright Mac and Buttercup, can tell them. There's so much yearning in that question. As for what little Goldie can say,
I know they loved each other very much. They had that magical, star-kissed, other side of a rainbow kind of love. You couldn't be around them too long and not feel a little bit lighter than air yourself.
ouch. That was a swift kick to the feels, make no mistake. Why? Subtext. Goldie Delicious, like every pony else, will only speak of Bright Macintosh and Pear Butter in the past tense. No pony ever says they are, indicating that they exist somewhere in the present. Nor does any pony ever say they will, indicating that those two might someday do something in the future. No, for Bright Mac and Buttercup, all their stories will only be they were. In my own life, some years ago, I lost someone who was very important to me. So you see, I know this conversation. I've had it before. I know the weight of that they were. It's not just casual conversation. I know what it means. It is my fond hope, gentle viewers, that none of you felt exactly what I felt when Goldie Delicious said they loved each other very much. Can Goldie tell Applejack anything else? Much disappointment. Goldie can't oblige. But then she does remember a pony who could help.
Your dad and his buddy Burnt Oak would get in all kinds of trouble together as colts.
Burnt Oak? The firewood sales pony? I haven't seen him in ages.
And now the structure of the episode is laid out. The Apple siblings will travel about Ponyville, hunting for those ponies who knew their parents in days of old, and asking for insight into the question of how did Bright Mac and Pear Butter get together? What were they like? How did they overcome their family's quarrelsome nature and wind up married? This is a perfect storytelling device. We, the audience, have these very questions. We want to know the story of Bright Mac and Buttercup, so we follow along a trio of ponies who want to know that story even more than we do. We share their journey, and in sharing it, we learn. Turns out that Burnt Oak bears more than a passing resemblance to Sam Elliott, and I did enjoy the brief sighting of Big Lebowski's The Dude pony buying rugs. But then...
Come to ask about your dad?
Yep.
Well, I wondered if you might. Hoped you would. It's nice to talk about him.
It's been quite some time since I first saw this episode, and I've seen it many, many times. I've watched a bunch of reactors react to it, but the hits to the feels have yet to lose any of their power. Subtext. The pony's teary eyes. Their use of the past tense. A hungry need from the Apple siblings to hear more about their father and mother, and the bittersweet desire to talk about friends long gone, to let them live for a brief while once again through memory and story. We learn more of how Bright Mac and Pear Butter became closer, and of the continuing feud between their families. As one might expect, Pear Butter's father wasn't exactly supportive of the idea his daughter might find an apple youth attractive.
No daughter of mine is gonna make goo-goo eyes at an apple.
Ah, shades of Romeo and Juliet. Well, in the whole star-crossed lovers thing, feuding families and emerging love. Although thankfully, unlike Romeo and Juliet, this is a love story that takes place across decades between relatively mature young adults, not a whirlwind romance that takes place over 5 days between two teenagers that leaves 6 people dead, including the central couple. After learning something about their father, Applejack, Big Mac, and Apple Bloom are naturally curious about their mother as well.
Did you know our mom, too?
Buttercup was a real peach of a pear. But if you want to know more about her, you should ask Mrs. Cake.
Mrs. Cake?
She and your mom were inseparable when they were fillies.
Love the character development here. And this all feels quite natural and organic to the story. The Apples are locals. Ponyville isn't exactly a large town. It would make sense that the ponies who would most likely know of Bright Mac and Buttercup would also be locals, ones who had been around back in the day, friends of the family and such. Oh, and here's another kick in the feels.
Would it be okay if we stopped by again sometime to hear more stories?
I'd like that very much.
You're welcome. Hey, if I have to endure these moments of pathos, you do too. Big Mac wants to know his father, and the only way he can do so is by speaking with his father's old friends. Said old friends clearly would like to share their memories of happier times. Bittersweet. But on to the cakes. Mrs. Cake's expression when Applejack reveals the purpose of their visit is perfect. A momentary fall into sadness, followed by a bounce back to a smile. Mrs. Cake would love to share stories about her fillyhood friend Buttercup. I can totally understand her hesitancy about sharing all this earlier, why this story is only now coming up. There really isn't a good time to start a friendly conversation by saying, "So, did you know back in the day I knew your dead parents?" No, that's the sort of conversation you wait to have until after someone else brings it up to you. These are difficult conversations, especially considering what occurred back then, and it's hard to know when it is a good time to bring it up. But now is a good time. So Mrs. Cake starts chattering. We learn a surprising amount about Mrs. Cake along the way. That her given name was Chiffon Swirl, so her married name would then be Chiffon Cake, and Cupcake, which Mr. Cake has called her before, must then be an affectionate nickname, rather like how Applejack calls pony she likes Sugar Cube. The romance unfolds. We watch as Pear Butter and Bright Mac fall deeper in love. It's the best love story I can remember seeing. These are two ponies, two genuinely good ponies who are very much in love and who are perfectly suited for one another. These are a couple who should be together. Thus the emotional punch behind every setback, every obstacle, and the eager delight with which we watch as they overcome those obstacles. And that song. Thank you, Felicia Day, for that song, and for your lovely portrayal of Pear Butter. Again, subtext. Over every love-affirming moment, there is a shadow. Every victory over odds against them carries a bittersweet sting. This is a tale of two ponies falling in love, but their happily ever after will be far too short, and leave their 3 children in the care of his grandmother. The story shifts to Mare and her own role in that distant tale.
I think that's my cue. I had the honor of officiating your parents' secret wedding, and it was perfect. Bright Mac knew Buttercup wouldn't want a big splash,
Reminds me of some pony else I know.
Yep.
so they had a special way to seal their vows.
It's beautiful. The symbolism of planting a seed in each other's property. The movements of Bright Mac's and Buttercup's mouths as Mare narrates clearly shows us the very moment when each of them said, "I do." But then enter their parents. And if there's one thing Granny Smith and Grandpear can agree on, it's that their children should not be together. Which leads to yet another great tragedy.
Pear Butter, enough of this nonsense. We're moving, and you gotta stick with your family.
But the apples are my family now, too.
You can't be serious. Are you choosing to be an apple over being a pear?
Are you making me choose?
Yes, I am.
Then yeah, I guess I am.
Fine.
Let's just take a moment to consider that this is almost certainly the last time Grandpear ever saw his daughter alive. Their relationship, their family, was broken by his anger. And before they had a chance to reconcile, she died. As for the Apple siblings, they feel the need to confront Granny and Grandpear, to bring all this out into the open again, to seek closure, resolution. First, Grandpear, a name that is so perfect for this character since it is a play on grand-père, which is French for grandfather. Introductions aren't strictly necessary. Grandpear knows who Applejack, Big Mac, and Apple Bloom are. And no, Grandpear didn't return to Ponyville just for change of pace, as he had told Applebloom at the start of the episode.
I'm so sorry. I was just so angry, but I never...
It's in the past, Grandpear.
I never thought, and Grandpear trails off. I'm pretty sure that sentence ends with, that I would never see my daughter again. But there is forgiveness. Then it's off to confront Granny Smith. Granny is deeply uncomfortable at the thought that her grandchildren were learning about their parents. There's a lot of tragedy there. And Granny herself wasn't exactly kind towards Pear Butter at first, although it looks like that may have changed, at least a little, when Pear Butter renounced her old family to join her new one. Even here, there is reconciliation. And with that reconciliation, Applebloom now wants to show both her grandparents something special, something that Bright Mac and Buttercup left their children as remembrance, something which clearly Bright Mac and Buttercup told their children they must keep secret from Granny Smith, who wouldn't understand, who might even have been a little hostile towards it. It's a living memorial on the border of Apple and Pear lands at the site of the wedding.
It's beautiful.
It's impossible.
If anything's gonna make it through, it's apples and pears.
This episode was something I found very powerful. On its surface, it's a love story, a tale of two ponies who loved each other very much, how they met, how their love grew, and how they married, even though that marriage drove a wedge between wife and her family. It is the subtext, the knowledge that Bright Mac and Buttercup won't live to a ripe old age, that they won't be there to enjoy their children's many and wonderful accomplishments, the knowledge that they will die far too young, that lends additional weight and potency to this sweet love story. But there's more. There's a new, powerful symmetry. Because now that we have seen, and seen so clearly, how much Bright Mac and Pear Butter loved each other, how perfect their pairing really was, the tale, thus far untold, of how they died now carries a subtext of its own. I don't know that we'll ever learn it within the show canon, but whether or not we ever do, that tragedy has been made more tragic by the knowledge conveyed through this episode of how great their love was. In other words, going forward, when we think of their love, we are reminded of their loss. And when we think of their loss, we are reminded of their love. If you wish to see my full reaction to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 7 Episode 13 titled The Perfect Pair, the link, as I mentioned earlier, is in the description. Feel free to leave any comments or likes for that reaction here on this Afterthoughts review. And until next time, as always, kindly remember, y'all are awesome. Stay awesome.